Welcome back to the Go He Cycles YouTube channel. I know it's been a little while since I've done some videos. My day job has taken a lot of my time, and usually doing projects like this, I just kind of come out here and work on things like this to kind of get my mind off the day. Some things are going on around the world right now that are different. A lot of people are faced with the fears of this coronavirus, this COVID-19 thing going around. Grocery stores, at least here in the U.S., everyone's fighting over toilet paper and bottled water, and I kind of came to the realization this week. I started working on this because I'm working from home, actually, and my commute to work is normally about an hour right now. So being that I'm working from home, I got a lot of extra time on my hands, actually 2 hours a day, and I thought, man, what can I do with that extra time? Well, this week I decided, I really haven't put any videos out on YouTube in a while, and what better time than now to give some people something other than doom and gloom and the world is ending and your local grocery store's out of toilet paper. So I decided that I'm going to film this entire build. We're going to call this the quarantine bobber. You're going to see in this episode, I cut the rear end off, I made the tubes, the down tubes to connect the top of the frame here and the swing arm, and obviously then made the cross-section piece where the seat is sitting. So let's go ahead and get started with creating this hardtail strut, 9 inches on center on the holes. Saw that I created that strut piece with the holes 9 inches on center and then got it mounted in the bike. Now it was time for me to take measurements and create the bent pieces here. I used 1 1/8 120 wall DOM tubing. It ended up being pretty much right at 25-degree bend, and I bent this up in my mandrel tube bender. So let me take the time now to show you how I created these pieces. We'll chuck these up in the bender right now and get them bent. Pull the tubing out, and then we have a nice piece of mandrel bent tubing. So at this point, I've bent the pieces of tube that are needed to fill that gap from where I cut the frame and the swing arm. I went through and drilled all the plug weld holes. I put 3 at each end on both sides, so we have a total of 12 holes, plug weld holes to plug weld once the bars are in place, and then obviously weld it all the way around. I think that'll be pretty good. And before I can make the crossbar where the seat's going to mount and get it in place, I really need to get these welded in, at least get them tacked in place with a couple really good tacks, and more than likely maybe just in case I need to move them for whatever reason, so that I can then take that middle bar that I made earlier with the 9-inch on center holes out of the suspension, and I need to cut off the piece that's actually holding that in place on the swing arm, so that then I can run the bar across for the cross piece. So let's go ahead and get these tacked in. All right, now that I got those side pieces tacked in place, I need to do a couple things. One, I need to pull the rear wheel, which I'll pull that off here really quick. And then I need to pull the bar out that I was using as like a temporary strut where the shock was at. I'll pull that out of there as well, and then we're gonna lob off the piece that was sticking up where the shock mount used to be that also connected the top and bottom pieces of the swing arm. So let's get that done now. All right, here's where we stand. This is all tacked in. Tacked in the front, tacked in the rear. Now what I need to do is I'm gonna put the seat on here really quick, and then I need to figure out what this bar needs to be for the cross piece. It's gonna go across here. And then I think we'll be about ready to start welding everything up. So nothing special here. I already coped one side of this, put a notch in that tubing, and I got my measurements, and just so happens it's right at 10.5 from inside to what will be inside. Let's get this other one cut. So here's a little trick that I do to make sure my tubing, let's say for instance this notch should line up, you know, with this one. So if we cut this wrong, and you know, these are parallel tubes like they are on the bike, this could be notched one way or another. So usually what I'll do is, and I can tell you right now this is off, I usually take a magnetic angle finder, stick it on here. First thing I'll do usually is find out, because a lot of times my vise isn't setting level. So what I'll do is I'll set it on top of this piece here that holds the tubing in place, and I see I'm at 4 degrees. So what I want to do is, when I set this on this piece of tubing, I want it to read 4 degrees. And I can tell you it's way off. So what I'll do is I'll hold the little piece of tubing up inside of the angled piece and literally just start loosen that a little bit. Let's cut on there. I will continue to turn this until I get 4 degrees out of it. I'm not quite there yet. So I just messed up my depth, but that's not that big of a deal. Once I get this set, it's really close. Right on 4 degrees. So now I know that when I cut this, when I notch this out, this notch and that notch will be exactly the same. So at this point I went through and I always clean these edges up. This may be a little blurry. You can see here. You can see that I clean the edges up with the right angle die grinder, just so you have nice clean edges. And I kind of beveled this a little bit on both sides so we get good penetration in the weld. At this point, let's try to slide it on. And oh man, it fits like a glove. Grab my tape measure, and what I'm going to do is, at this point, I think we'll go from point to point. I'll measure from this flange. There's markings on this flange. We'll measure from this down to that point, which gives me 10 and 5/16. And on this side we are at 10 and 5/16. So that's really in there good. And the seat springs, obviously, are going to go like this, and they're going to be on. I got to make the standoffs yet, but it'll be just like that. So I think that's going to be where it's going to go. Let me get tacked on, and I'll pull the wheel back off, and we'll weld everything up. Now that we got everything welded in, this is pretty much where we're at right now with it. I slid the whole bike back together, or the rear end back together, slid the wheel in with the axle. I got the seat put on so I could kind of figure out where this was going to land. And then I also needed to figure out where the springs were going to land on the seat. That is one thing that's pretty imperative, and the reason I hadn't just welded this middle section in, there was a couple times I took some measurements to figure out where that bar needed to be. Obviously, if you weld it too far back or too far forward, those springs need to be able to line up with that. So it's pretty imperative that you make sure you have the seat you're going to use for that bike mounted where it's going to go so that you know where that crossbar needs to be. So at this point, I think that's going to end it for the episode today. I think next week there's a couple things I need to do. It may be 2 small short videos. One of the videos is going to be me creating the 2 little seat bungs, probably getting those tack welded on so that the seat will be pretty much where it's going to go. And then I'm probably going to start working my way forward. A rear fender needs to be made, and that will probably be next week's video. Make sure you check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and our website, GoHeenCycles.com. Thanks again for hanging out with me. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all next week.